我哋開會。
We formed a quorum, so I call the meeting to order. Item 1 on the agenda. Information papers issued since the meeting on the 29th of May. We haven't received any information papers. Item 2, date of next meeting and items for discussion. The administration hasn't proposed any new items. If members do not propose any items, I suggest that we don't have a meeting in July. And then I would like to invite the public officers to give us a briefing on the latest overall economic situation in Hong Kong.
Song一次唔見你喎。
我上次去咗英國。
我去英國，我去睇波。
有睇波，喺電視睇啊，FA 球。
好，我哋歡迎我哋新。
I would like to welcome our Financial Secretary, the new Financial Secretary. I understand that he went to join the duty visit to the Great Bay Area. So if you have questions for him on that, I'm sure this is a good opportunity. Mr. Paul Chen, please brief us on the latest overall economic situation. Good morning, members. Good morning, Chairman. I'm glad to have this opportunity to come to the FAP. Well, for the global economy, it's been increasing continuously, and we've seen expansion of the major economic activities. In the first half of April this year, the IMF has adjusted the latest forecast of economic growth to 3.5%. Downside risk has receded, but we still have to pay attention to that. For the first quarter in the U.S., it continued with a modest growth. And then for the business sentiments, they have been maintained at a positive note. We've seen improvements in the labor market, and the unemployment rate has fallen to the lowest in 16 years. I think the U.S. performance is better this year than previously, but there are still uncertainties. Say, for example, the possibility of the escalation of protectionist sentiments. We have to watch its impact on us as well as the impact on global economy. It is expected that after the meeting in the middle of this year, the Federal Reserve Board may increase the U.S. rate. This would be the fourth in the year. We believe that the pace of the interest rate normalization will be quicker than that expected by the market. And then for the major central banks, there has been a divergence, and also the geopolitical tension is increasing. There may be a reverse in capital flow, and that would add to the fluctuation in the economies. The Fed has also said that it will reduce its liabilities, and this may mean a new landmark. For the euro area, the growth is modest. In April, in fact, the banks have also revised upwards a little bit of the expected growth, 1.7%. There are still uncertainties. The UK will be having the very complicated Brexit negotiations with Euro, and then there will be general elections in Germany soon, and there was an election in France, and without other special factors, it is believed that in the Euro area there will be modest expansion. For Japan, things have improved. Deflation risk has receded. There are still structural problems, namely population is aging and also higher government debt. such problems are still restricting the growth of the economy there. For the mainland, for the first quarter, performance was better than expected. For the year-on-year growth, it has quickened to 6.9%. Internal demand is still resilient. Exports have grown drastically. There's still room for the government to take on the challenges from the external sector. It is believed that it can maintain a medium to high economic growth. And then with the revival in the global picture, there will be a better performance in the Asian markets, and Hong Kong can benefit from that. For the first quarter, for our export of goods, and the real growth has been remarkable, as much as 9%. For the second quarter, again, we have recorded quite a significant growth. For the export of services, it has also picked up. And then for the travel industry's exports, it has also narrowed the fall. It is 1.2%. For the number of arrivals, it has increased continuously, an increase of 3.7%. For the first 4 months, we have got a 3.2% increase in relation to the number of arriving visitors. And then for the labor market, we have maintained a full employment state. And then for the season-to-season adjusted unemployment rate, it was 3.2%, a low level. And also the total employment figures have also increased year by year, and income has also grown. The internal sector is still resilient. For the private consumption expenditure, it has grown stably. And for the overall investment spending, it has also increased notably. The local consumption sentiments are positive, and then the retail and the tourism industries have picked up. For the retail figures, they have improved in recent months. For the latest figures from the census and statistics, as far as the business outlook is concerned, for the larger enterprises, the near-term outlook has changed for the positive. Now, the global economy has improved. Internal segment is doing good, and therefore Q1's performance will be better than expected. And then the growth was 4.3% on a year-on-year basis, an increase of 1.1% when compared with the previous quarter. Now, but we have to note that we have a notable increase because we did perform very bad in the previous year, and so that was a low base for comparison. For the near term, there will still be some downside risks, so I would maintain the economic forecast as stated in my February budget. That is, the real GDP growth is expected to be between 2 to 3%. If global economy continues to perform well, then we believe that the real GDP growth should be better than forecast. We'll be paying special and close attention to the internal and external sectors. In August, we will reconsider our forecast figures to see whether we need to revise the expected GDP growth for the entire year. For the inflationary pressure this year, again, it has eased. For the first quarter, 1.6%. The global inflation is still modest, and cost pressures from imports are still mild, and also because last year for the freshly let rentals given out last year, the effects are feeding through. So we believe that the cost pressures are under control. Therefore, we believe that we can maintain the forecast on underlying inflation rate at 2%. Property market. We still have a tight market. It is believed that our local interest rates will not have a strong pressure to increase. For the past few months, the property market has reactivated. And for April and May, we have seen an increase of 45% in terms of the growth of transaction, as much as 6,400 transactions, and an increase of 2.1%. The total increase in the price is 6.5%. It is believed that in May, we are going to see more transactions. Since 2003, the property market has been growing, and the prices have been growing. We have seen a sharp increase previously when compared with 1997, where we had the peak. The prices has grown by 89%. And when we talk about the mortgage payment to income ratio, it has grown to 66%. It is significantly higher than the long-term average between 1997 and 2016, which was 45%. It shows that most of the property prices are beyond our affordability. So to prevent the risk, we have already launched a number of demand-side management measures, like the new stamp duty late last year, and also in April we have also tightened our exemption measures so as to address the concern about one instrument covering a few transactions. This can control the demand. At the same time, the Hong Kong MA has also launched a new round of monitoring measures, including the following: that is, lowering the ceiling on the percentage of mortgage loans when the borrower requires a loan for more than one property. The risk management of banks has been enhanced, and also they are made to be more resilient. In the past few years, we have been providing our more flats, and the efforts are yielding effects. And we believe that in March this year, we expected that the supply would be 96,000, 50% more than the start of the current term government. It is again a historic peak. Please note that despite the very active property market we've seen lately, we have seen fundamental changes. With U.S. interest rates getting normal, the interest rates will only rise. And also the property market will see an increase in supply. In fact, we are going to have 20,300 flats per year, an increase of 70% when compared to previously. The previously tight market in the property sector would change, and this is going to increase the pressure. The government is going to watch the market very closely.
In making your decision in buying property, one has to be very careful in considering the potential risks. One has to assess the increase in interest on the ability of repayment. Mr. Chairman, with global economic upturn and Hong Kong's recent good economic performance, I hope that we'll continue to perform well, but we'll keep a close watch on the possible risk and the impact on our local economy. We will try our best to maintain economic stability and employment stability. I invite Mrs. Chen to update you on the latest economic performance of Hong Kong and the economic outlook, and then we'll answer members' questions. Thank you. Mrs. Chen. Well, I'll make use of the projections to PowerPoint to update you on the economic situation. I'll be brief and precise. With global economic upturn, Hong Kong's economy continued to rise further. In the first quarter, year-on-year, 4.3% growth rate, in comparison with the previous quarter, an increase of 1.1%. And it is the highest growth rate since second quarter of 2011. As for export, it's very important because Hong Kong is an open economy. As for exports of goods, the green line on the left-hand side, you can see that in previous quarters, growth rate has been going up. In the first quarter of this year, 9.2%, which is rather substantial. Basically, it is because of improvement in external factors. As for export of services, the red line on the right-hand side, we've seen improvement in most of the sectors. There is growth. And there is also improvement to tourism, though there was still a drop, but the drop in comparison with previous quarters had been reduced. Good performance in the export sector has helped Hong Kong in recording the fastest growth since 2011. As for the domestic sectors, it continues to be firm. Private consumption growth rate was 3.7%, quite substantial. that it was full employment and there was real growth in household income. Performance of the asset markets was also good, and people are willing to spend. As overall, investment sentiment is rather good. If you look at the right-hand side chart, annual growth year-on-year growth 6.4%, which is rather good. The labor market is maintained at a full employment state. Latest unemployment rate 3.2%, which is a low in previous years, in comparison to previous years. Overall employment rate, we look at the increase in new jobs. There has been increases. The growth in job opportunities lead to growth in better income. Overall, underlying inflation is maintained at a modest level. The latest underlying inflation rate in April, 2%. First 4 months, 1.6%, which is at a low level for in recent years. Inflation pressure is still under control. As for incomes, we can see there is real growth. Let's look at the various indices. After taking away inflation, there is actual growth, real growth, especially for the lower income sectors. Let's look at the number of low-income households and the percentage to the total number of households. It is maintained at a low level. As for the local property market, as said by the Financial Secretary, the property market has been buoyant. In the first quarter, property prices rose by about 4%. In April, it rose by 4%. The accumulated growth in the first four months, 6.5%. As for turnover, on the right-hand side, you can see that turnover increased from a low level in January to a high level recently. So mortgage payment to income ratio rose to 66% in the first quarter, substantially higher than the average rate of 45%, assuming the ratio may increase to 86%. The government is concerned about the buoyancy in the property market. We increase the supply so as to deal with the fundamentals of adjusting the tight situation in demand and supply. And the total number has increased to 96% and 96,000 and 70% medium and small size flats. That's the highest in the medium term. We would like to remind people that there is risk in investing in property and some fundamentals have been changed. In terms of interest rate, the low interest rate environment will gradually change. The normalization of U.S. interest rate will continue. There is only one direction for interest rate in Hong Kong, which is going up. As for demand supply situation, with the increase in number of flats in the private sector, the tight supply situation will be changed. And these factors will contribute to higher and higher risks in the property market, and people have to be aware of this. As for the outlook, the data from U.S. are rather positive. They show that the economy continues to improve. The latest unemployment rate in U.S. last week, 4.3%. It was the lowest level before the financial crisis, a 15-year low. And if it continues to be positive, then the Fed will gradually raise the interest rate. And in the later part of this year, there will be the shrinking of the balance sheet. The market expects that the chance of rate increase in June is 100%, and it's expected that interest rate will rise 3 times this year. Market expectation towards interest rate will lead to some fluctuations in the market. And the European situation is rather stable. It is better than we had expected at the beginning of the year. As for the impact of Brexit on the real economy, it is still rather moderate. The Brexit negotiation will soon start, and there are risks arising from the negotiations. As for mainland economy, it is better than expected. In the first quarter, year-on-year growth 6.9% was higher than the official target of 6.5%. Domestic demand continued to grow, and export is also growing. The mainland is able to maintain medium to high speed growth, and that is also a positive factor for Hong Kong's economy. Looking into the future for the remaining parts of this year, if there is, barring from untoward economic change and external factors, overall the economic situation in Hong Kong will not be bad. And the IMF has revised up its global growth forecast. It is expected to be 3.1%. The overall external factors improved in terms of investment, manufacturing, and trade activities. There is a rebound from the low level. We will benefit from all these. Therefore, as for local business sentiment, there has been a turn towards the positive side. Now, there is a reduction in downside risks, but there are still some potential risks. First, uncertainty arising from the pace of U.S. interest rate increases, and there will be uncertainties in the change in fund flows and whether there will be substantial fluctuations in the financial markets are factors we have to watch out. And there are also uncertainties in policies arising from Brexit negotiations, and also the elections in UK and Germany and France, and their impacts on the European Union. The economic and trade policies of U.S. are also also contributing to uncertainties in the external factors. These factors do affect Hong Kong because Hong Kong is an open economy, and there is also heightening of tension in geopolitical situation, and also the increase in terrorist attacks are our concerns. All in all, the first quarter's economic performance is better than expected, and the data so far have been positive. But taking into account uncertainties in global economic factors, more time is needed to watch for the situation of downside risks. The estimated growth of 2.3% will not be difficult to achieve. There may be room for upward adjustment subject to the second quarter data. Inflation is stable. Headline inflation, or rather underlying inflation, is forecast to be 2%. There will be a comprehensive review in August. So much for my briefing. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chan and Mrs. Chan. Who would like to speak, please raise your hand. Because time constraint, I'll limit the question and answer for each member to 4 minutes. Mr. Jeffrey Lam. Thank you, Chairman. Recently, the Lausanne Institute published a report, Hong Kong is still the first in competitiveness, but there are hidden risks. Property prices are high. This is one of the factors. Wages are increasing, and that is also filibustering in the council, and they are impeding the implementation of policies and also the implementation of infrastructure projects. I believe this is one of the factors. As for property prices, to have a home is the hope of people. If we can achieve that, society will be more harmonious. Now, despite the harsh measures, property prices continue to grow. New flats are sold like hotcakes, and in the second-hand market is as dull as ditch water. How can you help people to own their own homes? The final answer is to provide more land. There is proposal to make use of greenbelt sites at the periphery of greenbelt sites, and also country parks of low ecological value. I hope you actively find land for putting up houses. As for overall economy, is confusing. Now, general elections in UK and in Germany, Brexit, US may increase interest rates. I believe that there are uncertainties in the policies of Europe and also US, and there may be the possibility of rising protectionism, and there is tension in geopolitical situation. I say that is in the confusion. If you go for an entertainment, you may suffer from a terrorist attack. What are the uncertainties to us? Now you say you have ample policies to deal with these problems. Can you explain what those tools are, what those policies are? And what are the uncertainties? And if they do happen, what will you do? I believe that this will enhance the confidence of people investing in Hong Kong if you have those measures.
The Financial Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Lam, for your question. Mr. Lam referred to the risks in the external sector. They are genuine risks. On the one hand, we are watching the situation very closely. Say, for example, the United States, Europe, Japan, as well as the mainland. Well, Hong Kong is a free port. It is an open economy. It is small. When there are changes in the external environment, we will become susceptible. For the Hong Kong MA, again, we are in close contact. As far as the security of our financial system is concerned, we are very cautious. The Hong Kong MA has also launched a new measure. We are watching the pace of the normalization of the U.S. interest rates, and we'd like to watch the narrowing of scope of the balance sheets in the USA, because that will impact on the global capital flows. And given that the monetary policy in the central banks are divergent, we have to watch that as well. Mr. Chen Ying, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Both the FS as well as the government economists have given us a lot of data, and they show a favorable situation, like the economic growth rate, the low unemployment rate, investment and consumer expenditure have grown. For the property market, it is still buoyant, and the property markets are reaching new highs. I understand that as far as the administration is concerned, speculation has died down because for the confirmer sale, etc., there were only 39 of them. It is very low and much lower than 2,900 or so cases previously. But then investment activities have also reduced. Now, for the number of property transactions acquired by Hong Kong residents, that's the figure that the government relied on. But currently, I know that many Hong Kong permanent residents are asking their family members who haven't owned a domestic property to buy a property on their behalf. So how can you be sure about the actual buoyancy of the property market? Is there a way to find out whether somebody is buying a property for others so that we can tell really what the property market is like? And then for the low-income households, I understand that the number of such households is at a low level. But what about the elderly households? Since Q1 2001, we've seen the number of such households increasing all the time. Is it because we have got an aging population, or is it because of the statistical difficulty in getting the accurate information? Two questions here. FS. For the second question, I defer to the government economists. As to the property market, Mr. Chen has said that it has been seen in the market that sometimes a purchaser may try to have the transaction concluded via a family member or a friend who hasn't owned any domestic properties. I would like to say that if you entrust somebody else to buy a property for you so as to circumvent the stamp duty, of course there is a risk, one being that there may be disputes between the two individuals. And then I've also said that if you ask a third party to hold a property on your behalf, or even if you have signed a deed of trust to cover that, this may be against the law. So if you try to use this method to circumvent the stamp duty, on the one hand, it may attract criminal liability. On the other hand, when it is found that you have actually circumvented or evaded the stamp duty by using this method, you will be penalized, and it would be as much as 10 times the stamp duty that you have been exempted. So I hope the purchasers will be made aware of this side of the matter. I'll defer to Mrs. Chen for the question about elderly households. Please take a look of our document in Table 2. Indeed, as far as the number of elderly households is concerned, the number has increased. However, if you look at the percentage, which is the figure in the parenthesis, it is still at a low level. Only 0.3% of the households only. But of course, to a large extent, it shows an aging population and therefore an increase in the number of elderly households. Mrs. Regina Yip. I don't think the FS has answered Mr. Chen's question. He was really reading out once again the statutory provision. Actually, he would like to know whether the government was aware of the prevalence of such a problem. And what about the number of non-local residents acquiring the properties? Yes, the government is having new development areas. The government is doing the right thing, but it takes time. I'm sure the FS understands this. In the major cities on the mainland, I think there is a restriction on who can buy a property. Only locals can do so. And for places like Foshan, non-locals cannot buy any properties. What about Yunnan South, Hong Shui Q, and Northeast NT? The flats are built for our middle class. can we confine the transactions to permanent residents? And only permanent residents can be allowed to buy the properties that can reduce the demand. FS, well, getting somebody to buy property for you, I don't think we have the accurate figures involved. It depends on whether we have the evidence. As far as the statistical methods are concerned, I don't think we can get that figure. This is because it is not a legitimate act. It is not a lawful act. Mrs. Yip asked whether we would take Northeast NT as an example and try to introduce restrictions in relation to the status of the purchasers. What I can say is that we'll be watching the market closely. We are analyzing the situation and will try to come to a judgment. For the time being, I don't think it is right for me to indicate the government's position in response to Mrs. Yip's question. Why I say so? This is because if I start to say that we are going to introduce restrictions concerning the buyer's status is concerned, then I'm afraid this will give rise to the scenario in which many purchasers will rush to buy a property. This is not right. At the same time, I don't think it is right for me to say that I will disregard such a proposal, because it will be tantamount to escalating the prices again. FS, let me sort of interrupt. Mr. Chen has said that second-hand property transactions are on the low side. I think if you introduce the restrictions, then the secondary market will be revived, and then the CE-elect has also tried to address the problem in the property market. It's a matter of whether you have the will. Thank you, Mrs. Yip, for your question. As far as the property market is concerned, the government's policy is to give priority to Hong Kong people. That is beyond doubt. As to the point that you made, I don't think it's right for me to comment on it at this stage. I want to take this opportunity to give a word of warning. I think it is highly risky as far as our property market is concerned. A week ago, I think you have read in the papers, market participants and public officers have also warned the public. I myself have also warned the public a number of times. Mr. Chen Kin-po, thank you, Mr. Chairman. All the time, I've been asking the administration to develop the headquarters economy. If more international and multinational enterprises come to Hong Kong, then there will be more jobs of different natures for our young people, and they will have an international outlook, and they may also go elsewhere to find job opportunities. The quality of jobs will increase. But actually, we have seen a reverse in the trend. We have seen a 10% drop in the number of headquarters in Hong Kong. From 2644 to 2350, and then for regional headquarters, again a drop of 20 or so. The figure is now 1,379 only. This will have an impact on the economy. Job openings, office premises, expenditure, etc. will all suffer. So I want to know how you're going to drive the development of our status as a headquarters economy. FS. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chen, for your comment. On the part of the government, of course, we very much want to develop our economy. We want to introduce diversity in our economy. Mr. Chen has said that we should attract more enterprises to come here to set up their headquarters. In fact, we have also been very keen to do so. There are a number of points here. First of all, in the past few years, we have been signing bilateral taxation agreements with different places. This is because when an enterprise would like to set up a headquarters here, as to the number of CDTA as well as investment promotion agreements would be very crucial. And then the LegCo has also endorsed our proposal. That is, we would like to facilitate overseas enterprises coming to Hong Kong to set up their treasury services here. We'll continue with our efforts, and our ETOs in overseas countries have expanded their networks. For our mainland offices, again, we've set up more liaison units in the past 5 years, and we hope that we can improve our business environment and we can promote our attractiveness. Now, for the tax-related matters, again, we will study the factor involved. I just want to say that in recent years, as far as the international arena is concerned, we've seen new developments. The OECD and the EU have launched certain measures so that they want to know whether the local taxation measures would have a negative impact on other economies. And in fact, for the various amendments that we've introduced to the Inland Revenue Ordinance, including aircraft leasing, they have commented on our proposals. As an international financial center, we have been adopting a very cautious mode. That is, we will be studying the various aspects and would like to enhance our competitiveness. We hope that there will be more multinational corporations and more mainland enterprises coming to Hong Kong to set up their headquarters. They will revive our economy. It will also provide more quality jobs for our young people. Thank you. Holden Chow. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've noted that there is information in the papers before us that's causing me concern. First of all, for the property market, as many members have said, yes, we have a lot of draconian demand-side management measures. Despite that, the property prices are still escalating. I think currently the middle class are most concerned about this. That is, other than introducing higher taxes, the mortgage loan ceiling has also been tightened. For properties below $7 million, you can only borrow as much as 60% only.
You force people to take out a second mortgage. As for the primary market, the developers provide the second mortgage so as to help the buyers to get funding for the down payments. But in the secondary market, there is no such facility. And second mortgage has a higher interest rate than the primary mortgage. There's a table on the mortgage to income ratio. I've noticed that in the recent 10 years, the graph has been rising. And that is, the mortgage to income ratio is rising. And that is, the mortgage burden is rising. That is because property prices are rising, but incomes are not rising in tandem. And that may be related to the second mortgage. You've tightened the mortgage requirements, and therefore people are going to take out a second mortgage, and therefore the interest rates are higher, and therefore the payment of interest to income is higher. Now you have introduced so many measures, and therefore local people have difficulties in buying a property. People are queuing up for flats in the primary market, but the secondary market is very down. How can you care for the local people? We have studied this issue. Mr. Chow, at present it is not appropriate for us to relax any measure to help people to buy flats. If we introduce any measure, that will be interpreted as the government fueling the property market, pushing people into buying property when property prices are so high, in particular in respect of the marginal buyers who have limited repayment capacity. If we help them to buy in the secondary market, we are just harming them. That may be misinterpreted by the market as adding fuel to fire. Therefore, it is not appropriate for us to do anything. Let me reiterate it once again that the residential property market, from the perspective of ability to repay, the situation of supply in the future, and possible rise in interest rate, the property market, the residential property market is very high risk. And you have to be very careful in assessing those high risks. Mr. Wong Ting Kwong. Thank you, Chairman. Concerning the first quarter economic situation, the report is rather positive. Export, tourism, consumption, investment are performing well, and the labor market is at full employment. Inflation is low, so everything is good. But nothing has been said on investment in infrastructure because of filibustering, because nothing has been said on this.
財政司點睇呢個問題呢？
What do you think about it? How do you look at it concerning this? The downside risks are only limited to external factors, but what about local political factors affecting the economy? The local economy is stagnant. What do you think? Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Wong, for the question. In respect of infrastructure, our investment, we are no short of items. In terms of improving traffic and transport infrastructure, in terms of land supply and other community facilities, there are many items waiting in the line, whether it is in the PWSC or waiting for the FC. As for filibustering leading to delay in infrastructure projects and public works projects, we are concerned. In the construction sector, engineering sector, they've said that they face enormous pressure. You can see in the newspapers that university graduates have difficulties in seeking jobs in the construction and engineering sector. I hope members of different political parties, in considering applications for infrastructure projects, will help out and process the applications ASAP. Otherwise, the whole community will have to pay a high price for that. As for investment in infrastructure, such as the reclamation of Tung Chung New Town, the funding applications before the FC, or rather before the PWSC, that's very important to the medium-term supply. It is the reclamation outside the Victoria Harbour. If the size is about 100 hectares, a big piece of land, there is no need for redevelopment or relocation. We have a better control of the time frame, and we're able to provide more flats. The extension of Tung Chung will provide more than 49,000 flats. That's a very, very important project. That is only one of the examples. And if we delay this, then it will be hard to solve our housing problem. The FC is now considering the supplementary funding for SCL, Shatin Central Link. I hope the application can be dealt with ASAP. As for our domestic economy, it is still very good. But if there is a substantial delay in infrastructural projects, it will have a serious adverse impact on our economy. Thank you, Chairman. Is there any follow-up? Now in PowerPoint 19, number 19, concerning the downside risk. I have not seen anything representing what the FS has said just a minute ago. I hope that in future your report can be more comprehensive. Apart from considering international or external factors, you also need to include local factors. Thank you for your reminder. Mr. Mock. I've read the block by the FS yesterday in respect of the Lausanne IMD report. It's a grading of Hong Kong. You responded to the grading. I don't know whether the FS has noticed that though we rank number 1, the general response is more concern than celebration. Now we are top on the scorecard, and yet everybody feels that there are problems. Mr. Chen Kin-po referred to attracting headquarters to be relocated in Hong Kong. Now, when they come, they rent offices. That's helpful to the property market. That is also helping local spending, and is also providing jobs to local people. Now, I'm concerned that the government just refers to employment data, saying that it's full employment, you don't have to do anything. But what about the quality of jobs? We need quality jobs. We hope that there are jobs, high-skilled jobs, and quality jobs to be brought to Hong Kong. In recent years, in respect of high-tech companies, the investment by high-tech companies in Hong Kong is really a disaster. The government has adopted traditional methods. Say the Invest Hong Kong conducts roadshows overseas. There are recent examples showing that some companies come to Hong Kong and they feel that they are trapped in Hong Kong. When you attract them to come to Hong Kong, they come as you invite them to, but they face a lot of bureaucracies. Some MNCs, multinational companies, told me that they were considering Hong Kong vis-a-vis Singapore when they came to Hong Kong. The Invest Hong Kong show the PowerPoints as those you put up in your website, Mr. Chan. But when they went to Singapore, a whole team went to greet them, brought them to each government department and explained to them what policies might affect their investment, and they were able to adjust their policies accordingly. Now, when the multinational companies come to Hong Kong, the departments do not meet them. Even LegCo members asking for a meeting are denied. They say that there is a case with that company and therefore the department cannot meet them. As a result, these companies go to Singapore. A few years ago, when a multinational company came to Hong Kong, they wanted to invest in Hong Kong. They brought in some tens of jobs, but when they moved to Singapore, they are now employing more than 1,000 people, and they rent Grade A offices. They employ local people, and they are given a subsidy. Now, can you consider your policy, coordinate the government departments to deal with your outdated bureaucracy and laws, and so that you will not just sit there and doing nothing and just say that there is full employment? Well, let me answer the questions. I'll try to be precise in respect of the Lawson grading. We do not boast. I have pointed out that there is room for improvement in certain areas. And we adopt the same approach in respect of the ratings by various institutions. As we're attracting investment to Hong Kong in the budget, we've proposed to develop a pluralistic economy. We want to provide more quality jobs to young people. We are competing with Singapore. We have our own advantages. They are better than us in some areas. We should learn lessons from them. At the same time, we do have our own advantages. I think a major difference is that in terms of our policy, we are highly transparent. Mr. Mok referred to room for improvement. We'll certainly look into them. We welcome specific proposals. As for competing with other competitors, I think we need to discuss and work with the councillors and also the stakeholders. There are certain things which Singapore can do and we cannot do, and one area is transparency and accountability.
Dr. Elizabeth Quat, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The FS mentioned that the IMD has graded our competitiveness. We're glad to see that we are the most competitive economy. Yes, we are so in overall scoring, but then in terms of quality living, we were second last, and then for the digital competitiveness, again, we were only ranking at 7th. In fact, both factors would affect our competitiveness. In terms of digital competitiveness and also digital infrastructure, our rankings have been changing. We have caught up a little bit with the Innovation Technology Bureau, and we have seen more talents and more money coming to Hong Kong. We have the right ambience, but then compared with Singapore and other neighboring cities, as far as the digital economy is concerned, we are lagging behind. I understand that the government would like to develop Hong Kong into a smart city. We need a smart government to launch a smart city. In the previous year, I've been talking to different departments, and we picked up the idea of smart city. Some departments are quite open-minded. However, many others are more conservative, and they've been saying no to this and that. Therefore, it appears that for us to narrow the digital divide, for us to catch up, I think it's a matter for the government to look within oneself and try to encourage departments to make good use of innovation technology. And you should be the pace setter so that the whole society will also welcome innovation and technology. So my question is, FS, how are you going to do that? And then our cost of living is high, and it is always because of the lack of land for commercial purposes. We have been working hard to increase land for residential flat supply, but we are also lacking in commercial land. And then we have seen the prices in the CBD reaching record highs. So the cost pressure is increasing. I know that for the General Post Office in the central, as well as the government offices in Wan Chai, I think they should be vacated as early as possible, as it will take a few years' time to redevelop the sites. I want to know in the interim whether you have other measures to make sure that we can increase land for office buildings so as to lower the cost pressure. Thank you. I will try to give a succinct answer. I agree totally with you. There is still a lot of room for making greater use of innovation and technology. We should also drive the impetus, and then for startups and other INT enterprises working in Hong Kong will get our support in that we are using their products. The government is indeed taking the lead. As to the schemes involved, in fact, we do have a trial scheme for products to be sort of acquired as long as they don't exceed the limit. We have got 900,000 meters squares space available, 2.5 times when compared with the supply previously. For the central CBD, space is limited. We are considering the following, and we've also worked on the preparation. That is, would like to redevelop the Queensway. You also talked about the government offices in Wan Chai. Yes, we're working on that. However, before that can be realized, we have to make sure that the government offices on Kai Tak development and elsewhere are ready for moving in. Such projects are on schedule. As to the future land supply, we're mainly looking at East Kowloon, Kowloon Bay, Kwun Tong, and Kai Tak. More land will be available, but of course we have to rely on redevelopment by the private developers, and it will give us 2 times the land available in the central CBD for Kutong North, Fanling North, Hong Shui Kiu, and Tong Chung extension. We do reserve land for non-residential purposes. We believe that as long as we continue to work hard, I think the supply will improve. I hope members will keep their points brief. 4 minutes for both Q&A. Mr. Edward Yu, last month I have had a meeting with the WTO. I think the WTO is more concerned about the revival of the protectionist sentiments. I want to know about the government's response, because it is a high risk to our economy. I'm also glad to read from the government's document that finally the government has come to this understanding. That is, our downside risk has to do with the foreign exchange rates, with the U.S. interest rates being lifted. We believe that that would have an impact on our exchange rate because of the pegged interest rate. So the Hong Kong dollar will strengthen. So how are you going to address that problem? Well, as to the trends of the Hong Kong dollar, we'll be watching it closely. But there is one point that we are sure, that is, we are not going to change the pegged exchange rate. I'm grateful to Mr. Edward Yiu for pointing out that globally speaking, we are all concerned about the protectionism, in particular, the new U.S. administration, what has been said and what has been done. Well, a few months have passed as to whether the policies proposed will be implemented and how that will be done. There are still a lot of possible variations. In Hong Kong, there's no way that we can challenge the protectionist sentiments because we are a small open economy. Our success has been built on being open and free, and we will continue with such a policy. At the same time, 2 months ago, I attended the Baal Forum, and the theme was on free economy as a countermeasure against protectionism. I think other than the USA, I think most other economies still want to uphold a free market. We will insist on being free and open. We will also work hard to have more bilateral and multilateral cooperation agreements. Take the ASEAN as an example. For the free trade agreement with the ASEAN, the negotiation has been completed. With national support, we are going to conclude the agreement. Hopefully, end of this year. It is going to help us a lot. This is because currently, even though the US is still an important market for us, Europe, the ASEAN, as well as the mainland markets are important for us. In this way, our risk can be sort of diluted. Thank you. Next, Mr. Lee. Thank you, Chair. I would like to pick up the point made by the FS publicly. That is, our high rentals have affected our competitiveness. And in fact, for quite some time, especially during the time when you were the Development Secretary and for the time that you have taken up the post of the FS, well, we have been told by the business sector that the rentals are accounting for a very, very substantial portion of their costs. So as the FS, do you know the figures? We know that it is a fact. But do you know about the impact on the business costs? Do you have the accurate figure about the magnitude of the increase? And have you carried out any decision to respond to this? Now, for the small shop rentals, they're increasing. Even for subdivided units, the rentals are increasing. And for Grade A office premises, again, the rentals have increased. FS. I would like to thank Mr. Lee for her question. Mr. Chairman, for properties of different nature, I think the vacancy rates have always been low, whether we're talking about factory buildings, Grade A offices, or residential properties. Given such a low vacancy rate, unavoidably the rentals have been rising all the time. And the rate of increase has varied according to locations. For the Queensway and the Central CBD, the prices are indeed very expensive. But if you go to East Kowloon, then the rentals are relatively much cheaper than those in the CBD. And it takes time for the properties to be built, and so there is a lagging effect. In the near term, as far as office space is concerned, the commercial rentals will not be subject to any rental control. We haven't had such a policy consideration. And then for the past 5 years, 900,000 square meters of space has been disposed of, 2.5 times when compared with 5 years ago. Now, to respond to Ms. Lee's question, with the increase in the flat supply in the coming years and with the rolling out of the various programs for the new development areas, we believe that the tension will be eased. But then the low vacancy rate would mean that the rentals may not come down easily. For the past year or so, shop rentals have softened. I think that's basically what we have observed. FS, I believe that you will remain on the team of accountability officials. Other than giving us such a reply, can you not work more on the data so as to find out whether the rentals are accounting for an unreasonably high portion of the cost? And then for the tax regime in Hong Kong, you have said that you would like to have a taxation review. What is the progress? For the data, I do have the data, but I didn't have time to defer to Mrs. Chen, the government economist. Thank you, FS. Thank you, Chair. For the Census and Statistics Department, every year we do compile information about the business costs. The latest figures referred to the case in 2015. The business cost varied from one sector to another. Owing to the interest of time, I better provide the information in writing afterwards. Generally speaking, the economy was rather stable, and therefore the rentals might have some slight increases, but then the case varies from one sector to another. For the retail industry, it has consolidated recently. The retail sales have weakened, but then the costs, the rentals are still high, and so the cost pressure on the retail sector is, relatively speaking, harsher. For the taxation review, yes, the work has commenced, but at the same time, we're still trying to recruit staff members. Next, Mr. Wu Chi-wai. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think members have already asked questions concerning the property prices. I think for the property prices to escalate, it appears that the government cannot do much. I hope the government has the will and determination to provide affordable housing to the people of Hong Kong. FS, you used to be with the Development Bureau. I'm sure you have heard my message loud and clear.
This is the only way out. Otherwise, the property market will still be distorted. In particular, in the private property market will be distorted, and society at large will suffer. I hope the Secretary, the FS, will focus his efforts on providing adequate affordable housing to the people of Hong Kong. With regard to property price, property with value below $7 million, the majority of the people are not able to afford such. Even the middle class will not be able to afford that. The government should provide adequate land to provide affordable housing. That's the government's responsibility. That's a point of view. Secondly, on the IMD, Lausanne IMD report, Hong Kong is regarded as as number one in competitiveness. You are happy about it, but there are certain points which are rather enlightening. They say that we rank 62nd in cost of living, second last. And also science and technology infrastructure also rank 12 only. Whether you will be the FS or not, do you have any tricks so as to improve our science infrastructure, promote innovation? And it's also important to reduce the cost of living. and property price accounts for a substantial portion of that. Now, as for the Innovation Technology Committee, you have called its meeting. Our Reindustrialization Committee has had its meetings. Are there any measures to reduce bureaucracy and expand the scope of industrialization? As for housing, on various occasions, I've already said that housing is hard to afford according to present-day prices. And to deal with the housing problem, we should increase the supply of subsidized housing. I have jotted down Mr. Wu's view. As for the Lausanne ranking, I wrote in my blog yesterday, we were not complacent about the ranking. And in my blog, I said that the cost of living and also various types of infrastructure have room for improvement. Cost of living refers to the cost of living of expatriates in Hong Kong. Rent is a major factor. As for our infrastructure, other institutions gave us top ranking. This time in the 20s. It was not just traffic infrastructure, it includes social infrastructure, science and technology infrastructure. In fact, there is much room for improvement for science and innovation infrastructure. The setting up of the Science and Technology Bureau is an important move, and I have reserved about $10 billion for innovation and technology, and the Bureau will discuss with the state, with the sector. As for the Reindustrialization Committee, which is chaired by me, it is for innovation and technology and for reindustrialization of Hong Kong. We're going to chart a new path for that, and work has just started. Mr. Kenneth Leung, FS, with your leadership, taxation reform will continue to move forward. Hong Kong needs not only a simple tax regime, we also need competitive tax regime. As for foreign investment in Hong Kong, it's not just limited to the tax environment. I want to speak on 2 or 3 points. First, on being business friendly. Invest Hong Kong stability is a question. If you are continue to work for the people of Hong Kong, I hope that you will lead an investment group to coordinate the work of different government departments in respect of foreign investment in Hong Kong. Is about financial matters, environmental matters, labor and welfare matters, immigration matters. When foreign investors have any problem, they can go to this single window instead of going through or knocking on the doors of different government departments. As for our taxation regime, other than our taxation regime, and also business-friendly attitude, there is also the issue of infrastructure. I've heard that expatriates complaining that they are not able to find schools for their children. That's very important. Another point may not be very direct, but it is about living environment. It's not just rent, but also air quality or the environment at large. I think we are doing better than Singapore. Singapore faces air pollution caused by its neighboring country because of forest fires. I hope that you will improve our environment. In particular, my reference is to the electric car. As for business being business friendly, I'll look into that, as suggested by Mr. Lau. As for attracting foreign investors to start up their business in Hong Kong, there is room for improvement. As for places for international schools, there are district variations. On Hong Kong side, there is a shortage. The situation is better in Kowloon and in the New Territories. On the whole, there has been improvement, but there is still room for improvement. In order to attract talents from overseas, education is one of the education for their children is one of the aspects. As for electric car, I've heard of you. We'll look into that with the relevant policy bureaus. Mr. Chan, the FS, I have this question. Now, in your blog, you forecast that this year's economy will be better than that of last year. But the risk of the property bubble is increasing. And the former chief of the HKMA said that the next financial crisis will be even more serious than the previous one. And the Secretary for Financial Services and Treasury pointed out 3 risks. And they are the availability of low-interest funds, the lack of awareness of financial crisis. People are concerned about the movements in the financial market. Some say the bubble will soon burst. What is your advice to the people of Hong Kong? What are the measures to avoid the crisis? Chairman, this is very important, a very important question. And we are watching the situation very closely. As the FS, I have put in a lot of time in monitoring the financial markets and maintaining the healthy operation of these financial markets. If we are doing well, there is no problem and people don't feel that. We spend a lot of time and effort on watching the market, and I agree that there are risks in comparison with 1999 or 1997 and also 2008. The integrity of our financial systems has been much better. Now we've introduced 8 rounds. The HKMA has introduced 8 rounds of anti-cyclical measures. After the rounds of measures on the individual level, the borrowing ratio of individual buyers has been reduced. The economic fundamentals are good, but from the point of view of personal consumption, there is no overspending or overborrowing. And the capital adequacy ratio is 18 or 19%, higher than the international standard of 8 or 9%. And the classified loan percentage is only 0.7%. In comparison with US, UK, France, Italy, Japan, we are performing better. In terms of the system's integrity and our ability to withstand any shock, we are in a better position. And financially speaking, we are healthy. But the property market is very risky. And market sentiment is very heated. And we have to pay attention to this. I want to belabor the point that the normalization of interest rate in the U.S. is a trend, and interest rate will only go up, and the pace may be better than expected. And when the balance sheet shrinks, then international fund flow can change very rapidly, and the rise in interest rate can be faster than expected, and that will affect your ability to repay loans. Future supply will increase. As at the end of March, in the coming 3 to 4 years, in the primary markets, the supply will be 95,000 units in comparison with the time when we took office, which was 64,000. There was an increase of 50%. As at the end of March, the flats that are available, 20,300 as at the end of March. Now, application for sale of pre-completed flats could be made 36 months or 30 months before completion, and the number of units that fulfill the conditions about 24,000. So, in the coming 3 to 4 years, 96,000 flats will be available. These are real numbers, and you will have to pay attention to that. From January to May, applications for pre-sale of uncompleted flats, about 8,500 have been approved. In comparison with any period, it is far higher. Last year, 6,300. Year before last, 3,600. 2 years before last, 4,100, and then year before that, 1,500. In the past 5 years, on average, is about 3,600 per month. So the supplies are coming. The supply is coming, and one should not ignore that. In the coming 5 years, according to the rating evaluation department, the availability will be about 25,300 per year. In comparison with the previous average, just 11,700, an increase of 60%. These units will affect the rental market. It will increase supply. If you buy a pre-completed flat, since the flat has not been handed over, your desire to buy a flat has been satisfied, but you have not moved in. With the completion of these flats, people will move in, and then your original flat may be let or may be sold because you move into a new one. And these are real supplies. There will be responses in the market.
Yes, you may have seen a lot of promotional measures, but I hope the investors will keep calm. In particular, we've seen parents paying for the down payment of a property for their children. Parents, as a result, may have to bear the pressure of mortgage repayment. For the society of Hong Kong as a whole, we are resilient, but then at the level of individual buyers, I would have a word of caution for them. FS, you have been working hard to address the housing problem. We are fully aware of that. For your future work, I have full confidence in you. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. We have a second round of questions. 3 minutes, please. Mrs. Regina Yip, FS. I would like to pick up the point made by Sarah Lee, that is the expensive shop rentals. You have said that the vacancy rate is low, but then in Causeway Bay, many shops are vacant. The landlords are not willing to give way because the rentals have shot up a lot. So in relation to the ground floor shop spaces, are you going to introduce a tax on vacant shops? Another point is that you said that for international schools on the island, it is difficult to get a school place. And in fact, in Hong Kong, we have found that we have the scenario in which we have pencil-like buildings shooting up here and there in very crowded places. A former FS, that is Anthony Leung, has suggested that perhaps we should build a super prison next to Gong Ah Po so that we can re-provision the prisons. What about moving the prisons to the mainland? Anthony Leung did ask me for my advice. Be brief, please, FS. Thank you, Chair. For the ground floor shops, yes, the rentals have come down. Mrs. Yip has pointed out a scenario, and I think that is also a fact. For prisons, there was a consultation to see whether all the prisons can be consolidated to form a super prison. The feedback from the society was strong, and so it hasn't been launched. When I was in the post of the Secretary for Development, we did look at the possibility of taking a look of the penal institutions on Lantau and trying to have them consolidated. We're going to follow this up. I don't think the society reacted strongly. The government didn't want to waste the site next to Gong Ah Po, and I think Shenzhen has also got certain views. So please reconsider it. It will release a lot of valuable land. All right, that's it for this item. I would like to thank the FS as well as the government economists for coming to our meeting. And that takes us to the fourth item, annual briefing on the work of the Financial Reporting Council. For those who would like to speak, please indicate by showing your hands. But a moment, please. Let's wait for the representatives from the FRC to join us.
呢個係由佢邊個答嘅咧？
唔係呢個，仲有呢個 Paul Wing 求問答嘅。佢都 OK，呢兩個都會答。Paul 會可能做嘅，或者係由佢做嘅。哦，
即係 Paul 嘅。
咁你請阿歐生。
好啊，我哋請阿歐。
Mr. Au, would you like to walk us through the paper briefly? Thank you, Chair. For this item, I would like to defer to the CEO of the Financial Reporting Council. He will give you a brief progress report. Thank you. English channel, English channel, English channel.
Okay. This is on, is it? Good morning. Thank you very much for inviting me to present to you this morning on the workings of the FRC for the last year, 2016. I'm told to speak for no longer than 10 minutes and then allow questions and answers. I intend to stick to that. You have already received the slide pack, and if I move on to page 2 now. 2016 was my first year as CEO with the FRC, and I'm very pleased to inform you that it has been a very active year. I'll deal with the statistics very briefly later, but this will demonstrate what an active year it has been for our operations. Not just our operations, but we've also had a focus on enhancing operational efficiencies. So, for example, with the approval of Council and our Operations Oversight Committee, we have made various changes to our operations manual to streamline quite a bit of our work. This has also enabled us to retain the all-important checks and balances built into our system to ensure fairness in the process. We have streamlined our complaints process and are now much closer to working within the 90 days expected within our operations manual than we had previously been, although there are some that are taking somewhat longer. As a result, we are moving into the investigation process much quicker than we had done previously, hence the rise in overall numbers of investigations under our caseload. We also amended our operations manual to deal with vexations and nuisance complaints, which will come into play in future years. We have amended our approach to reviewing financial statements. We now are looking at filters to try and identify real non-compliance with accounting requirements and auditing irregularities. Those filters centre around a couple of areas. First of all, announced changes of auditors due to unresolved issues. Situations where the company is being audited by an audit firm which is small in relation to the complexity of the audit. I have no objection to small audit firms, but in relation to the complexity of the audit could identify accounting issues and auditing issues. Where there has been alleged non-compliance in media or HKEX or SFC reports, or where significant prior year errors which indicate a misleading reliance has been placed by investors, then we would look at those financial statements to see if we can find any errors. We also look at modified audit reports to see if there are any indications there and filters. One change for 2017 is that we're now bringing that entire financial statements program in-house. We previously sent them out to various reviewers. We will not be doing that in 2017. Collaboration with regulators is very important for us. Within Hong Kong, we have regular liaison meetings with the HKICPA, the SFC, and the HKEX. Apart from discussing cross-referrals and complaints that affect both of us, we also use this opportunity to discuss how to improve our individual efficiencies collectively and make our responses more real-time, something I believe in quite strongly. Our discussions with the Ministry of Finance on access to working papers in mainland China are ongoing and continuing. And we also attend international conferences and the Asian Area Regulatory Group on a regular basis. Turning to page 3, which are the brief statistics, and I've updated you for what's happened from the beginning of this year to the 25th of May, which was last week. You will see that in terms of pursuable complaints, we had an enormous number of increase in the pursuable complaints, which we had to deal with during 2016, hence a very active year. The financial statements selected for review in 2016 were less than in prior years because the filters were producing less financial statements needing review. We have not done any yet this year because we make that selection in the second half of the year. You will see that the number of complaints has come down to a more usual level already this year. Completed investigations. 2011 we completed 11 investigations, which is the largest number of investigations completed since the FRC commenced 10 years ago. So far this year, to the end of May, we have completed 8, and there are 3 more undergoing approval this week, which means in the first 6 months of this year we will have achieved the same as a full year in 2016. So I think you can see we're getting through our workload with some vigilance. Inquiries are a little bit more difficult because they require an independent committee to look at them. And while we've not completed any, I expect one to be completed shortly out of the 2 that are in progress at the moment. In order to do this, we've had to increase our staff complement from 22 last year to 26. We currently have 4 vacancies, but we're spending money on professional staff, not administrative staff. Last year, I stated at this very meeting that I expected to complete more than we had done in 2015. I'm pleased to say we did. Turning to page 4. In terms of complaints, as you can see, we started the year with 24 complaints outstanding. We received 118 within our remit. We initiated investigation or inquiries with 11 of them. We referred 4 to a specified enforcement agency, such as the HKICPA or the Exchange or the SFC. And we completed 113 that did not require any follow-up action. The statistics for the current 5 months are also on the left. Progress at the end of the period, we're now back down to below the level seen at the end of 2015, and there are, of the 16 currently outstanding, 2 cases will not be evaluated further as they are not related to a non-compliance or irregularity. So we are closing out the complaints quicker than we have done in the past. On investigations on page 5, in 2016 we brought forward 30. We initiated 18 in the period. Again, an equal, there was one other year, 18 were initiated some years ago. So that's an equal record since we began. We completed 11, a record in 1 year. And in progress at the end of 2016 were 37. And the statistics bring you up to date. With the extra 3 being approved, completed this week, we are down to 32 in progress, back down to 2015 levels. Approximately 4 of these require an MOU with the Ministry of Finance to get access to working papers in mainland China. That is beginning to hold up those 4 cases. Turning to page 6, the audit of regulatory reform is something else that has kept us extremely busy during 2016 and involved a lot of high-level management resources. In late 2016, we updated our report on independent audit oversight, and that demonstrated that the rest of the world had evolved further since our last report in 2013. The International Forum for Independent Audit Regulators has not made any significant changes, but the EU changes for international recognition have changed, particularly with regard to governance of the oversight body. 41 territories now comply with both IFIR and EU compliance, demonstrating that I think Hong Kong needs to move on. Our conclusions from that report, provided the legislation follows the consultation conclusions, we see no impediments to Hong Kong joining the world of independent regulators, as said, if the proposals are enacted as proposed. Finally, page 7, looking forward, we will continue to further strengthen the standards of professionalism and integrity of Hong Kong's auditing profession. The proposals for our future are imperative here, as I believe that the strengthening the standards is mainly carried out through inspection of firms, which is an area we hope to be taking over in the future. We will continue to maintain our collaboration with other regulatory bodies in Hong Kong, China and internationally. Internationally, we are recognised and supported substantially by international regulators. They are answering a lot of queries for us and helping us grow and enhancing our knowledge and experience. We're very grateful to them for the assistance they give us and the support they give us. We will enhance our public transparency. Again, we intend to publish further policies and procedures and guidelines in the future, and they will all be available so the public can see how we operate and nothing is hidden from anybody. We expect to assist government in their proposed legislative process and provide input as they see fit from us. I expect this to be a major part of our effort in the coming 18 months, approximately. We will enhance our relationships with other jurisdictions to pursue our investigatory role in a more effective manner. I said our meetings overseas help us in that respect, and we will be able to pursue memoranda of understanding. That is my presentation on what we've done in 2016. You have the full report in front of you. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may like to ask.
Paul.
Thank you, Paul. 4 members have asked to speak. Please, you are given only 3 minutes. First, Mr. Chen Chen-ying. Thank you, Chairman. This is not the first time he called me Leung Chen-ying. I have 3 questions. First, para 16. The FRC firmly believes that there are no impediments to Hong Kong joining the World Independent Audit Regulators in the near future. But how soon can Hong Kong become an independent, joining the World of Independent Audit Regulators? Now, the funding of FRC is jointly provided by the government, the SFC, and also the HKEX and the HKICPA. If they want to do more, can more resources be provided? The cost is about $29 million per year. Do each member or does each member have an equal share? I was a company secretary. I've noticed the structure of the FRC, that it is not easy to let people know how it operates as an outsider. Now, I have noticed that some committees are internal committees. As for the Operation Review Committee, the Financial Review Panel, they are actually exercising its duties. So, who are the committees that who are the members who join those committees? I hope that you will review your structure so as to reveal what committees are doing the auditing and inspection, and what committees are just doing internal work. Paul?
To your first question on paragraph 16, I'm not able to comment on that, as it is government that are going to introduce that bill. So it is not within our remit to make any comment on that particular area. We hope it will be soon. On your second point about funding, there are 4 funding parties. Each of the 4 funding parties contributes an equal amount, divided by 4. The approximate 30 million is divided by 4. But in addition, the company's registry provides free office accommodation for the FRC. Thank you. That is how the funding operates. If we require more funding, we need to come to LegCo to agree additional funding. We produce a budget every year, which is looked at by FSTB, and that's approved. We have recruited some additional people, and we may next year have to dip into our reserves a little bit because the funding is fixed until 2019. There's a 5% annual increment until 2019. So that may be where we are on funding. Of course, if the legislation is introduced, then the funding becomes a completely different matter as we take on new responsibilities, and that will be debated fully, I'm no doubt, during the Bills committee stage. I am intrigued by your comment that it's hard to understand how we operate and what the committees do. It is my intent to make sure that we are easy to understand, and we will look to see how our website can try and enhance that. I would refer you, however, to our annual report, which was sent to many LegCo members, where in that report it talks about who the members of the committees are in detail, and also provides a summary of the activities each committee carried out during the year. But let me briefly summarise by pointing out that our operations oversight comprises majority of council members and other lay members who provide check and balance on our input, together with relevant accounting and auditing expertise to ensure that we've taken up the right elements in our reports. The other committees are our Remuneration Committee that looks at our resourcing and the remuneration process in considerable detail. The Oversight Regulatory Committee, which again looks to see what assistance government needs in their bill, and looks to see, will look to see what the draft legislation will look at. Again, that has people that are familiar with regulatory environments to advise. We have a corporate communications, and that's very important to us, is that we do make sure we communicate with the public and with everybody else. And I will take your comments on board that you find it hard to understand how we operate, and I'll discuss that with my corporate communications people later on. And we have obviously a finance committee. Although our finances are pretty straightforward, they look at everything with tremendous rigour and are sent a draft of management accounts every month. So they're the principal committees.
OK，我再提醒。
I'd like to remind members that our time is running out. I can only give you 3 minutes for questions and answers. Next, Mr. Holden Chow. Thank you, Chairman. According to the paper, with regard to the handling of complaints, in the past years, on average, 25 complaints were taken on board. In 2016, the number rose to 118. I just want to ask the Council whether suddenly, within a year, there were so many complaints. Did anything special happen during that year? And I also want to ask this. As for some cases, the HKEX or the SFC referred those cases to you. Now, in respect of your supervision of auditors and listed entities in comparison with the supervision of listing entities by the HKEX, what is the division of labor? What is the how do you draw the line? Mr. Paul Wickerman?
Yes, commencing in late 2015, there were a series of complaints that appeared to have come from the same party, we believe an individual. They were all addressed against one particular audit firm. We did not have the ability at the time to deal with them in a simplified manner. So we dealt with them in our normal process. But it did, the council members suggested that we look to see if in future we could deal with vexatious cases, as there were none of these required follow-up and were wasting our resources significantly. So we've now introduced a way of identifying vexatious complaints in future so they don't delay our existing workload. This year we've not had any such complaints, and we're back to a normal level of 12 in the first half of the year. Seems to be about a normal level. So I believe we've dealt with that particular issue. The division of labour is a very interesting question. Clearly, when we get referrals from the SFC and the HKEX, actually we're probably already anticipating them because we see in the newspaper adverse media reports, and we do meet on a regular basis and ask, are you going to refer that particular case to us? The division of labour is quite simple. If there's any element of a non-compliance with accounting requirements by the listed issuer, or that the auditors have failed to do their audit diligently, then we will launch an inquiry into the company, an investigation into the audit firm. And we look solely at the accounting issues and auditing issues. We do not look at any other area. The SFC and the Exchange will then wait for us to complete that work while they also continue their investigation into other matters, such as compliance with listing standards, market misconduct issues, etc., which falls within their remit and not within our remit. So there's a very clear delineation of work between us.
Good. Next is Mrs. Regina Yip.
I have two questions, and I hope Mr. Winkleman won't take offense at the first one. The first question is that I have received complaints from some SME accountants that there is a perception that your investigations tend to focus on SMEs rather than the Big Four. You know, would it be possible in future to provide breakdown of your cases? The complaint is that you disproportionately focus on firms outside the Big Four, you know, partly because you are from a Big Four firm yourself. You know, I don't know whether that's true or not. It's a perception. Secondly, there is also a comment that because of mainland Chinese laws on 檔案法 archives and Chinese laws on secrets, state secrets, 檔案法 and 國家機密法, a lot of the SME firms which do business in the mainland cannot bring their working papers to Hong Kong. Are you aware of that? In your pursuit of efficiency, can you take that into account? Because they say you are making life very difficult for these SME firms dealing with mainland clients.
Okay, first of all, I take no umbrage at the first question, whatever.
Thank you.
Now, in actual fact, it turns out that quite a few of the complaints, and remember it's the complaint that drives the work that we do, and quite a large number of the complaints have come in relating to small and medium-sized firms. As I mentioned earlier, sometimes these firms take on listed company audits that are quite complex, and perhaps their ability to fund the resources needed is a bit lacking. I have no objection, as I said before, to small and medium-sized entities taking on listed companies, but they need to recognize when they outgrow their expertise. We do not avoid taking action on the Big Four. If a complaint comes in against the Big Four, and 113 of them did last year, we rigorously pursue each and every complaint. The Big Four do not get any special treatment at any stage from us. They are perhaps slightly better able to respond to our queries because they have quite a large general counsel and internal technical departments that are used to dealing with complaints from regulators, including ourselves. So if you take out the anomaly of those complaints I mentioned earlier on, small size accounting firms of 5 or less partners or directors accounted for 19% of our pursuable complaints last year. 50% related to medium-sized accounting firms with 6 or more partners, and 31% applied to Big 4 accounting firms. But remember, it is the accounting treatment that is important firstly, and the large firms that the Big 4 audit tend to be better able to deal with their accounting treatments than some of the less well-organized listed companies. Therefore, complaints come in on the less well-organized listed companies. This is not to do with us targeting anybody. We respond solely to the complaints that come in and deal with each and every complaint. We do not target to review any size of audit firm, and we never will. In terms of the access to working papers, yes, I am more than aware of it. I've spent quite a lot of time meeting with the Ministry of Finance in China during the last year, trying to get them to agree a memorandum of understanding with us on access to working papers in China. We, of course, understand the regulations, and the regulations were tightened up in July 2015, meaning we just cannot get access to anything at the moment. Neither can the HKICPA. So in terms of launching investigations, they have to be held up. We do, once we look at the complaint, if there's nothing to pursue, then we close the complaint. If there is something to pursue, in order to provide the evidence, we would need access to the working papers. In the absence of being able to get that, we are unable to pursue that investigation any further. Therefore, we do not continue to badger any firm, regardless of size, for working papers currently in the process until we can get a memorandum of understanding properly drawn up.
Okay, thank you.
OK， 梁繼昌副主席。
Mr. Kenneth Leung.
Mr. Winkleman, obviously the role of FRC is not just an investigator of listed companies' auditors, because in your PowerPoint, one of your mission of FRC is to further strengthen the standards of professionalism and integrity of Hong Kong's auditing profession, correct? Could you tell me, I mean, in the future, your organization would be the promulgator of auditing standards. What work will you do in order to raise the auditing standard of listed companies' auditors? Are you running any education program, or are there any plans in the future to do so? The reason is that I don't think the success of FRC will necessarily build on the number of cases you're going to investigate, but rather I think in the long run you should try to concentrate on those real important cases, and in the long run you should try to raise the standard of the profession so that these complaint cases will reduce. I'm also speaking on the standpoint of the long-term budget of the FRC, because if the number of cases escalates in future, I mean, your budget, I'm so sure, will be increased exponentially. So what are your views on my questions?
I completely agree with your questions. First of all, let me remind you, we will not be promulgating auditing standards. The HKICPA, under the proposals currently, will continue to issue the standards. We will have oversight of that process only. In terms of educating, I think, personally, I believe that investigation and discipline actually only punishes those that deserve to be punished. That doesn't help in enhancing professionalism in any profession. That is done through the inspection regime, which, again, if the proposals are carried through, we would be undertaking. My view there is that you can work with the audit firms, each of the audit firms, you can work with them to understand their concerns, understand what their their resources constraints are, how they operate and how they work. And you help them to grow and improve through inspecting and agreeing with them a process by which they improve year by year, not by taking them to investigation. So I'm quite clear about those two areas. I don't know if that's answered all of your question.
Yeah, fair enough.
OK，仲有冇議員？
All right. Does any other member wish to speak? If not, then that's it for this item. I would like to thank Mr. Paul Winkleman.
Thanks, Kevin.
好，我哋進入第5個議程。
Item 5 on the agenda. Subsidiary legislation and code relating to the open-ended fund company regime. Please invite the relevant public officers to join us.
One thing. 係咯。
嗰陣咁多人㗎。哇！得唔得啊？大排人一次。喂，下次叫佢哋。公司自責處。下次叫佢哋真係。
唔係我哋得一個真係好難睇喎。
好難啊！係。即係我哋要。
好啊！我哋請政府得。
I'd like to give the floor to the public officers. Please try to finish your briefing in 5 minutes. Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, members. In relation to the Securities and Futures Ordinance, an amendment ordinance has been enacted, and we have provided for a legal framework for OFC, that is Open-Ended Fund Company. When the principal ordinance was amended, we have said that we will be introducing subsidiary legislation and code in relation to OFC. The subsidiary legislation and the code will set out the details concerning the operation. We would like to finish this part of the work as well, so that the industry can use the tool of OFC to set up a fund. The subsidiary legislation and the code have been drafted, and we are almost ready. And therefore, together with other colleagues on this side of the room, we have come here to give you a briefing. Later this month, we are going to issue a consultation document, and the industry will be welcome to give comments. I would like to use a PowerPoint presentation to walk you through the details of the subsidiary legislation as well as the code. I believe that you have already got a hard copy of the PowerPoint. Can I start? We can see it from our notebook, but not so on the screen of the chamber. If I may very quickly introduce the OFC regulatory regime to you, as well as the preparation work for the subsidiary legislation and the code. For the interest of time, I would like to be very quick about the background on page 3. That is, the SFC is the primary regulator which will register the OFCs, and then the company's registry, the CR, oversees the OFCs incorporation and statutory corporate filings. And the Official Receiver's Office, ORO, oversees the winding up matters. Page 4 shows you the OFC structure, which is true for the major players. So there will be a board and there will be an investment manager which should be licensed or registered for Type 9 regulated activity from the SFC, and there will be a custodian for the safekeeping of assets. Page 5, we have set out the relevant rules and regulations and ordinance applicable to OFCs. We have the SFO, Securities and Futures Ordinance, and the Amendment Ordinance in 2016. And then we have the OFC rules, which will be the subject matter of consultation, as well as the OFC code. Well, it can be a public or a private fund. So in the case of a privately offered fund, it means that only the blue part will apply. For a publicly offered fund, then it has to meet the requirements laid down in the SFC Products Handbook. Page 6, a brief word on the proposed rules. I'd like to tell you about the key areas to be covered. We'll cover the OFC's formation, capacity, as well as the maintenance. There will be a one-stop service in relation to the submission of papers, and then the incorporation matters, and also the transfer of shares among the shareholders or directors. And then for the key operators like directors, investment manager, and custodian, we talk about the appointment and succession appointment of them. And then the functions of the CR will also be listed in the rules. And then for the umbrella OFCs, as well as the sub-funds of the umbrella OFCs, we have the segregated liability feature. And then for the qualifications of the directors, for the disqualification orders, and the penalties are also listed here in relation to the offences. For the OFC code, it will be issued by the SFC, which provides guidelines setting out the operational details as well as some administrative matters. For administrative matters, they will be covered. There will be details concerning dates of meeting and ways to call meetings. And also we have the specific requirements concerning the custodians, and then details of the financial reports. And we are going to have a streamlined termination process. This is because for OFCs, their operation is such that they would only call for a streamlined termination process, but it is still subject to the approval by the SFC.
方面我哋都會作出一啲細節嘅要求嘅。咁呢一頁我哋主要就係講出就係話我哋喺訂立呢啲規則同埋守則嘅時候係參考咗而家國際監管標準常規啦，同埋有關公司條。
We have made use to the relevant laws and also the principles of the IOSCO. If there is any breach to the rules and code, the SFC may exercise its investigatory, supervisory, and enforcement powers. There will be specific penalties for the offences. Let me now turn to this one-stop establishment process of the OFC. To facilitate the setting up of OFCs and also the filing, the efficiency, the filing system, that is a one-stop process. on establishment. The applicants will lodge all the application documents, including the documents required by the CR and the IRD, to the SFC. And then the SFC will pass these documents to the CR after we've vetted those documents. And then the CR, the certificate of incorporation will also be issued in tandem with the approval of the SFC. As for filing, if any document that are related to the SFC, they will be submitted to the SFC directly, and after giving approval, the SFC will pass on the document to the CR for registration. Let me now turn to fees. According to the amendment ordinance, the SFC may make regulations for charging or collecting of fees by SFC, CR, and ORO for services provided. As for the SFC, we will deal with two types. For publicly offered OFCs, and we do not impose any additional fees. We will deal with it according to the existing fees rules applicable to publicly offered funds. As for privately offered OFCs, we will just charge the minimum basic registration fees, and we have no intention to charge any annual fee. And when there's a need to approve any changes, we will impose a fee for changes accordingly. As for the CR and ORO, the fees will be set. The fees are in schedules. The fees are set on a cost recovery basis. The CR, in respect of the formation and maintenance of OFCs, will charge 43 types of fees, and the ORO will charge 31 types of fees in relation to winding up. And they are applicable to the winding up of companies. As for the time frame, as said by Ms. Cheng, the SFC intends to issue a public consultation paper within June in respect of the rules and codes for the OFCs. And after the completion of public education, or rather public consultation in the first quarter of 2018, we will submit the finalized OFC rules, the finalized fees rules, and commencement notice to this council. Our target is to commence the OFC regime in 2018. That's my briefing for the committee, for the panel. Does any member wish to speak? Professor Yeo. Thank you, Chairman. I think there is a point which is just mentioned lightly, and yet this is a public concern, and that is the prevention of tax dodging and also prevent abuse of the exemptions. The paper is not specific on these 2 points. So how can you deal with tax avoidance and also abuse? With regard to the rules and code, they are pertinent to the operation of the OFCs and also the setting up and also operation of OFCs. As for tax, all the offshore funds are tax exempted as far as profits tax is concerned. what is being left is the onshore OFCs, which are offered privately. The government has intention to amend the law so that this part will also be given profit tax exemption, and that has been announced by the FS in this year's budget speech. As for the tax prevention of tax avoidance measures, in the draft bill, we will impose certain requirements. In fact, in March we did mention this. There are requirements on ownership. The OFCs are corporations. They can enjoy exemption in terms of profit tax, but they have the responsibility to file tax returns, and the IRD will adopt the current mechanism in overseeing these OFCs. Time is not adequate. Can you give us a simple paper to supplement the onshore funds, a timetable on that? Will there be a mismatch in the timetable? And concerning profits tax exemption, can you provide information in writing? Yes, we can. In March, concerning the tax aspect, we did speak on that, and we hope to introduce a bill within this year. We're doing it full steam. Our timetable can match the present plan. The whole OFC regime will be available together with the tax requirements. My concern is about tax avoidance. That may be related to other industries. I don't know whether my understanding is correct. By using an OFC to invest in property, will there be any problem with tax avoidance? The OFC will have to register with the SFC, and the SFC has requirements on what an OFC can do. And when we amend the text to provide tax exemption, we will put down very clearly as far as what types of businesses will have profits tax exemption. To put it simply, an OFC cannot deal with property business. Now you have all the information. Can you provide the information after the meeting in writing? Sure. Next, Mr. Kenneth Leung. Thank you, Chairman. I have 3 questions. After the legal framework has been set up, I've talked to the relevant professions. What type of investment funds will adopt OFCs as a strategy? It's rather doubtful whether OFCs will be popular. That's a real question. As for the slide number 6 on insolvency, can more explanation be given on segregated liability feature? If there is a protected cell which has become insolvent, what will be the impact on other protected cells? I believe you will deal with it in your subsidiary legislation. The third question is rather simple. It's about a publicly offered OFC. The SFC's handbook on publicly offered trusts and mutual funds. That handbook will be applicable to a publicly offered OFC. Do you need to amend your handbook in order to suit the publicly offered OFCs, or do you not need the amendment? I'll answer the question, and then Ms. Choi will supplement. Concerning what types of funds will have an interest in using OFCs as a vehicle. In deciding on the scope of investment, we have considered all Type 9 regulated activities. So securities and futures will be included. Apart from this, we have considered private funds. They may have cash, bank, deposits, deposit certificates, and other transactions, and they will be included. An OFC can be a public fund or can be a private fund. If it is a privately offered fund, we will give it more flexibility. That is a 10% de minimis rule. In the investment, 10% can be type activities other than Type 9 activities or some specified regulated activities. So it can take care of the investment products offered by the funds. Ms. Choi. Thank you for the question, Mr. Leung. What types investment fund will adopt the OFC structure? We say that publicly offered or privately offered funds can adopt this. The SFC has talked to the trade, including Investment Fund Association, and many local funds have also given their opinions. The international investors are not familiar with trust laws. In particular, in continental Europe, their funds are incorporated funds, and they want to make use of OFCs as an overseas sale strategy. As for protected sales, and the segregation of liability of sub-funds, of umbrella funds, umbrella OFCs have to adopt segregated liability features. Each sub-fund is segregated in terms of liability so that when a sub-fund goes under, other sub-funds will not be affected. In the in the regulation, we will have arrangements and provisions. After taking leave from the experience of other countries, there will be provisions specifying the segregation. When the regulation, in the consultation document, you will see the details. As for the product handbook, whether all the provisions are applicable to the OFCs.
I just want to clarify. Well, the public funds can take the form of a trust or an agreement or an overseas company and have the authorization and be subject to monitoring. In other words, this is permitted. And then for statutory requirements, the OFC rules and the code will also provide for detailed provisions. I don't think there would be any conflict between the two. Finally, I want to ask a question too. We believe that for the OFC-related subsidiary legislation, I can see that the SFC has responded to the market concerns, and you are going to have the one-stop service In other words, the applicant will provide the papers to the SFC, and then the entire application process can be finalized. I think this is commendable. I just want to know whether the SFC will do the same for local securities firms. I think for the local securities firms, when we would like to apply for incorporation and transfer of licenses, etc., usually it will take a long time, like 6 months or 12 months. Can you do the same here? I think it's best if we have a one-stop service as well. Another question is, the purpose of having the amendment ordinance is to get more overseas enterprises coming here to set up their headquarters here. I want to know whether there will be online verification if they are to offer the fund to the investors. Thank you, Chair. I think you would like to know whether the same service can be provided to applicants for license. And also when intermediaries would like to go to another firm, it takes a long time. Thank you for your proposal. I can refer your idea to our licensing colleagues. We have had close liaison with the industry players as to why we have one-stop service for OFCs. This is because we have to involve both the CR as well as the SFC. We would like to facilitate the industry. As to licenses, it involves the SFC alone. Of course, for each and every case as to the time needed, it depends on the complexity. For both local and overseas companies, we adopt the same criteria. We also hope that we will be having a dialogue with the industry to see in what areas we can introduce improvements. The industry has told me that if they want to go to another firm, it takes 2 months, 2 months' time. In other words, they will be losing their income for 2 months. So please try to do something to facilitate the change of jobs on the part of our intermediaries. You talk about offering the fund to overseas investors. You want to know whether online promotion is permitted. Yes. How can we allow the overseas investors open an account with the company? I think for both overseas and local investors, we are aware of the advancement of technology as well as the prevalence of online investment activities. For the opening of accounts, the SFC in October last year sent a circular in relation to the verification of identity of customers at the time of account opening. We have provided guidelines, say for example, verification provided by the specified organizations. This is facilitating. We will examine the process and will try to be as facilitating as possible. Yes. I think you haven't finalized the verification for online account opening. Why so late? For the OFC, you are doing a lot to facilitate the development of OFC, but without online verification, it will hold back the development. So I think with the coming in of the subsidiary legislation, you should do your best to verify the customer status. Yes, we'll liaise with you to see what can be done to make it better. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? If not, would like to thank the government officials for their briefing. Thank you.
呢個應該佢問啦，呢個都關乎大陸嘅喎。
呢個關好多嘅啫。
特別大陸公司最多。係。佢，如果國內同嗰個。係咯。
梁振英舉一手啊！
好，咁啊，我哋請政府代。
I'll give the floor to the administration. I'll give you 5 minutes to walk us through the paper. Thank you, Chair. Well, the purpose of the paper is to brief members of our plan of extending the application of the Multilateral Convention on Mutual Administrative Assistance in tax matters. This is about amendment to our IRO and also better cooperation at the international level. I would like to brief members on why we would like to have the application of the Multilateral Convention extended to Hong Kong, and we'll talk about the way forward. I think members understand that in recent years, international tax cooperation schemes are growing in number. We want to combat tax evasion, and we would like to have more and more cooperation. So we have the AEOI. That is the automatic exchange of financial account information in tax matters, as well as BEPS, base erosion and profit shifting. They are important items, and as a responsible member, we have taken on board both items. It involves a lot of information to be exchanged. For the OECD and EU, they have an open attitude. They allow members to take part in the multilateral conventions as to facilitate exchange of information. But at the same time, you may stay away from the multilateral convention and rely on bilateral agreements, so that you have bilateral agreements with your counterparts. If the bilateral agreement network is big enough, then it means that you can still have exchange of information with many partners. In the past, we have been relying on a bilateral model. Therefore, for countries with which we have signed taxation agreements, we have bilateral agreements. Like AEOI, we have 11 such agreements to facilitate exchange of information. From our experience, if we work on the basis of bilateral agreements, it takes a longer time. This is because we have to get the agreements concluded from one country to another, and we may not be able to meet the expectations of the EU or the OECD. If you care to turn to our paper, paragraphs 10 and 11 will tell you what we have already told you. For the OECD and the EU, they will do this in the second half of the year. They will try to see if a specific country is lagging behind, and if they are not satisfied, the country will be listed as non-cooperative and it will be penalized. For the OECD and EU, they think that multilateral convention membership will be an important factor. In fact, it is one of the three criteria. Participation in multilateral convention will enhance our status in terms of the benchmarking. If we still rely on bilateral agreements instead of multilateral convention membership, it will work against us. All over the world, 110 countries have joined the multilateral convention membership. So the bilateral exchange approach is not a mainstream approach. We have examined our case. Continuous reliance on bilateral agreements as well as the latest international developments would mean that if we want to meet the latest requirements of the OECD and the EU, probably multilateral convention membership is the way out. Recently, we've got the approval from the government. Now, Hong Kong is not a sovereign power. We have to work through the Central People's Government and have the multilateral convention extended to Hong Kong. China has already joined the convention membership. So among the 110 signatories, some of them are not sovereign states, and they have to rely on the extension of the multilateral convention to them. So we will be having the same approach with your understanding and with your support so that we can move from bilateral to multilateral basis. Then we will actively draft the legislation needed so that before end of the year, we can come back to you for your scrutiny. Well, we understand members' concerns. For us to take part in such international cooperation agreements and multilateral convention, you want to know whether we can protect the interests of Hong Kong. Please read paragraph 14. There are two types of provisions. First, mandatory provisions. Second, optional provisions. That means you have a choice. You can ask for reservations. On our part, for mandatory provisions, of course, we have no choice and we have to have them applied to Hong Kong. For those optional provisions, that is, for those that the OECD believe that it is up to participating members to make a choice. Say, for example, in our paper for paragraph 14, there is a table, items E, F, G, and H, like simultaneous tax examinations board, assistance in recovery of taxes, etc. At this moment, we believe that we should not be having them and will propose to have reservations. Now, in October this year, you'll come back from your summer recess and we're going to introduce an amendment bill into the LegCo. Our participation in the multilateral convention will be on such a basis as stated in paragraph 14. We're happy to take questions from you. Thank you.
I thank the Deputy Secretary for the briefing. Anyone would like to speak? Mr. Chen Chen-ying. Thank you, Chairman. I have two simple questions. The first one is about the CPG. The CPG, in principle, approves this. So is it that we need to pass our own law and then we go through the various procedures before joining the multilateral convention? Another point is about mandatory and optional requirements. In para 14E, it is a borderline case. It's mandatory, but it is to be decided by the party to participate in a particular examination. It said that generally Hong Kong will not participate in any simultaneous tax exemptions. What are the factors under consideration which make us not to participate in this? Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chen, for the two questions. First, I'll answer the first question, and then the question on simultaneous tax examinations will be answered by Mr. Chiu of the IRD. As for the application to the multilateral convention, his understanding is correct. We have already got the CPG's in principle approval to extend the application of the multilateral convention to Hong Kong. The next step is that we have to amend the IRO to incorporate the provisions of the multilateral convention into our IRD to make it an international agreement that in which Hong Kong participates. This is similar to the CDTA or TIERS. With this arrangement and with the passage of the amendment ordinance, we will issue a multilateral convention order. And after that, with the approval of this council, we can then approve to the we can then report to the CPG, and then the CPG will report to the OECD, informing the OECD that Hong Kong has completed the legislative procedure and can participate in the multilateral convention. And then Hong Kong can work with the signatories for the exchange of information. Mr. Chiu will speak on simultaneous tax examinations. Now, in the multilateral convention, there is no provision that you cannot. There is no provision that you can enter a reservation, so it is mandatory. But it also allows a participant to make a policy statement that it will not participate in any simultaneous tax examinations. Hong Kong can consider not participating in simultaneous tax examinations because many countries have a global tax system. If Hong Kong, but yet Hong Kong has a territorial tax system. If there is an incident that involves tax incidents that covers two territories, then Hong Kong will be interested. But since we adopt a territorial tax regime, there is no need for us to do so because there is none such incident. Now, Professor Yeo, my question is in respect of 14A. I hope an explanation can be given. It said that there are certain tax types, such as profits tax, or rather taxes, profits tax, taxes on capital gains, which are imposed separately from the tax on income or profits and taxes on net worth. I hope more explanation can be given. And you also say that we propose that Hong Kong would only provide assistance to limited tax types above. Does that include all that are listed in the above paragraph, or those that I have read out? And the second question is, more resources are needed to comply with the agreement. Mr. Lai, and then I will answer the question first, and then Mr. Chiu will answer Professor Yu's question. Mr. Yu has made a succinct operation. many countries have joined the Multilateral Convention, and if they are interested in our tax information and have made inquiries, that will certainly increase the workload of the IRD. But at the present stage, we have yet to make an assessment on the increase in workload. This is something untested. Now, we do exchange information with countries that have signed bilateral agreements with us. In the future, the network will be much broader, and we have to consider the trend in the workload. If additional resources are needed, we will go through the established mechanism to get additional resources. As for the tax types to be covered, Mr. Chiu will speak on this. Now, the Multilateral Convention covers many tax types. The Policy Bureau and the IRD propose a minimum number of tax types, and they include income tax, profits tax, and also capital gains tax. I refer to disposal gain. It is not the capital gains in Hong Kong. If the disposal gain is not covered by tax on income and not covered by profits tax, that will be included. But as for tax on net wealth, that is not present in Hong Kong, but is present in other countries, and that will be included. Now, as for the implication on resources, and you say you don't know, would it be a very important aspect in concerning our reservation towards this proposal? Can you base your assessment on the present bilateral agreements? Will that assessment be helpful? Mr. Chiu, I'll try to answer the member's question. According to the latest information we have, I may not be able to give you the exact numbers. Every year, concerning requests for exchange of information, there are about 400 odd cases. They are based on EOI agreements. They are our major trade partners. By extending it from 40-odd countries to 100 countries, I believe the increase may not be 100%. Some countries are not our major trade partners. Their trade transactions, trade volume with us are not too big. So the manpower requirement may not be doubled as a result. I agree with Professor Yiu. The IRD is reviewing the increase in workload, and if need be, we will seek more resources, or we may redeploy our resources. Mr. Holden Chow. Thank you, Chairman. Now, this multilateral convention is something Hong Kong has to join. If we don't join the convention, we may be regarded by other countries, in particular the European Union, as non-cooperative. Hong Kong is an international financial center. It is not possible and should not be regarded as a non-cooperative jurisdiction. There's a need to join the Multilateral Convention. My question is this. Now, in your paper, you mention simultaneous tax examinations. Can more explanation be given? According to the multilateral convention, there are certain things that are mandatory, such as AEOI and also the tax types cover. It's very clear. It covers profits tax and capital gains tax, but in Hong Kong there is no capital gains tax. As for simultaneous tax examinations, though it's mandatory, it is for the signatory to decide whether it will participate in any such examinations or not. And it says that simultaneous tax examination refers to an arrangement with jurisdictions, each in its own territory, to examine tax affairs of persons in which they have a common or related interest, with a view to exchanging any relevant information. Does it mean that there are somebody doing business in a certain in a certain jurisdiction, and therefore it is regarded as a common related or related interest, and therefore that is simultaneous examination? Is my understanding correct? The Deputy Commissioner. Thank you for the question. Let me give you an example. Hong Kong is a territorial-based tax regime. Generally, our investigation is focused within Hong Kong's territory. There is no need for us to go outside Hong Kong to conduct any examination. But overseas, tax authorities may have a global tax regime. So their examinations have to be conducted both inside their territory or outside their territory. In Hong Kong, we have our own procedures, and they are all conducted in Hong Kong, within Hong Kong's territory. We have no need to work with the overseas territory and look at the situation of the business there. But overseas tax authorities may have such a requirement, or may have such a need. But according to our own policy, we don't necessarily conduct simultaneous tax examinations with overseas tax authorities. Well, we cannot rule out the possibility for individual cases, but generally speaking, it is not a must for us. Chairman, can I just ask a one-sentence question? Yes, please be precise. I've heard your explanation is very clear. We are not going to investigate others, investigate companies outside Hong Kong. We just look at local companies. We just look within our own territory. But they are global. They have a global regime, and if they want to conduct examinations in Hong Kong, must we allow them to conduct examinations in Hong Kong? For F, it's about tax examination in foremost territory. We don't need to entertain this. If they want to send a team here to conduct an examination, we have entered a reservation. So the situation I described is not under E, but under F, Tax Examination Board. Correct. It's very clear. Mr. Kenneth Leung.
好，多謝主席。咁我都有好多。
Mr. Kenneth Leung, Deputy Chair, 2 questions. For Annex B to the paper, we have the 111 partners participating in the multilateral convention. I want to know whether it has got anything to do with the Inland Revenue Amendment Ordinance 2017. There were 80 or so such jurisdictions. How come that there is a discrepancy of 30 jurisdictions? And my other question is as follows. I want to know whether there will be a lot of amendments. According to Mr. Lai, the Deputy Secretary, he was saying that probably it is only a matter of adding the full title of the multilateral convention And then there is this constitutional requirement to notify the Central People's Government, and then they have to have it put on record. I want to know whether we can sort of enact the amendment ASAP. Mr. Lai, thank you, Mr. Leung, for your questions. For the 111 jurisdictions listed in Annex B, they have taken part. They have participated in the OECD's multilateral convention, which facilitates exchange of information for tax purposes among the members. So there are 111 of them. As to the other figure that probably members remember, that's about the AOI, the automatic exchange of information. Again, it is an OECD project, and all over the world, 100 took part. Mr. Leung wondered, now for the information to be collected for the second half of 2017, we are proposing an amendment, and it is hoped that the bill can be read the third time on Wednesday, and I appeal to members for your support. And we have about 70 jurisdictions referred to in that amendment ordinance. This on the basis of the 100 jurisdictions under the AOI regime. We know that about 75 of them have indicated their interest to exchange information with Hong Kong. There are also EU countries or the 40-plus partners of our taxation-related agreements. And therefore, we have included the 75 jurisdictions in the list of the amendment ordinance or amendment bill. Yes, it is different from the list of 100 or 111. The difference is that some countries have not indicated the interest to exchange information with Hong Kong, so their names do not appear on the list of the amendment bill. Mr. Leung would like to know how complicated the amendment bill will be. We just started the briefing instructions with the DOJ. We have just asked them to help us to do the drafting. So at this moment, if you want to know about the magnitude of the complexity, I don't have an idea, but on the face of it, it won't be too complicated, and that's why we hope that when you come back from your summer recess in October, we can immediately introduce the amendment bill into the LegCo for your scrutiny. So we hope that we can make use of the opportunity before your summer break to give you news of our work today, so that by October, when we introduce the bill, you would have already got an idea. Any follow-up from the Deputy Chair? Happy with that? Yes, very happy. Thank you very much. All right, that's it for this item. AOB. We haven't got anything under AOB, so meeting adjourned. Thank you.